Good morning, and thank you for joining us here on the Morning Medical Update. I'm Jessica Lovell. It is summer, and just like many of you, we are working hard to bring you some fun and exciting shows come fall. This morning, we are bringing you a rebroadcast of one of our favorite shows. If you have any questions, please leave them below. We will answer them during our live broadcasts on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So sit back and enjoy this best of Morning Medical Update. Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, March 3rd. Welcome to the Morning Medical Update. Thank you so much for joining us right here on Facebook, YouTube, and now on Twitter. Our discussion today, as we see the images of the devastation left from Russian troops invading Ukraine, they are simply hard to digest. It is heartbreaking. Dr. Stephen Lassen, a child psychologist, is here. He is from the health system. He has advice on how to talk to our kids about war and other tough topics. Many adults are also feeling stressed out, concerned and helpless about what they're seeing, but also worried about rising prices and falling 401ks. Psychologist Dr. Nawalanic will help us navigate those concerns. And many do just simply feel helpless. They want to help in any way they can. Chief Medical Officer at Heart to Heart International, Dr. Agustina Behringer. She is going to join us with ways that they are helping and how you can help out too. In this morning's medical headlines, as the COVID-19 pandemic enters its third year, the death toll continues to rise. New research published in the journal Lancet, Child and Adolescent Health, more than 5 million children worldwide lost a parent or caregiver due to COVID. Making it, of course, even tougher on children is the fact that they could not see their loved ones diagnosed with the virus way before they passed away. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that coming up here in just a few moments. If you suffer from a chronic lower back pain, new research finds it alters what and how you eat. The study conducted at the University of Rochester found those who are always in pain seem to eat more and put on more weight because that's the best way that they can deal with the situation, and they're afraid to maybe do a lot of movements. Other research suggests that the brain's reward system may be an important factor in linking pain and obesity. More than 1.5 million Fitbits are being recalled because they can burn you. That's not good. Over 100 people have reported the batteries of the smartwatch overheating, with some people suffering second and third degree burns. They were sold nationwide from December 2017 to December of last year, and you can return those for a full refund. Parents, we finally have an answer to why our children eat the way they do. Researchers at Penn State say when kids are given a meal, their dislikes are more likely to motivate what they eat than what they like. They add that adults around the children may sway them with opinions about food and those facial expressions. So get your questions sent into us today on YouTube, Facebook, Medical News Network, and we will get to your questions here in just a little bit. But first, let's get to Dr. Dana Hawkinson. Good morning to you.
Hi.
Are your kids good eaters? Do you have to, like, when they were little, was it
really.
like, don't you just love that spinach?
No, they're
like
birds.
teenagers now,
Yeah.
so they probably just eat anything, right?
They hardly eat anything. They don't have very broad palates.
They don't. Okay. All right.
But I would say it sounds like the adverse events from a Fitbit, those rates sounds like it's much higher than any of those from the vaccines for COVID-19. So I think we still know that the safety and efficacy of those COVID-19 vaccines, and can never miss an opportunity to endorse the vaccinations. So our cases are going down. We were in the 40s last couple days. I believe we've been in the 30s for active infections. Right now we have 38 active infections, 5 in the ICU, 2 on the ventilator, still 55 in that recovery period as well. So a total of 93, but the numbers are going in the right direction. Let's hope they can stay that way. And we'll just see how the next 7 to 10 days continue to trend.
All right, keep us updated. Yeah. Doc Hawk, we'll get back with you here in just a few moments. Let's just check and see if we have any reporters on the line, though. And we do not, so let's get moving. Okay, it's been a week since Russia invaded Ukraine. The horrific images and videos are hard to process and even harder for kids to understand. So how do we help them navigate the anxiety surrounding these type of images and these tough topics? Joining us this morning to help out with this is Dr. Stephen Lassen. He's a child psychologist, and Dr. Nawalanic. He helps all the other people out there. How you both doing today?
Good, thank you.
Good to see you both, and lots of questions. Dr. Lassen, I do want to start with you. If kids ask about these type of images, what is that conversation supposed to look like? I know they can go in all sorts of different directions. But initially, you're watching the news, my kid walks in, sees what's on TV. How do you start that conversation?
So when kids ask us questions, it's a good indication that they're ready for information. So we should see that in a really positive light, and parents shouldn't become too anxious themselves about questions that the kids might have. Kids are thinking about this, and when they ask questions, they're ready to hear something. And so it's a good indication that kids are engaged, they're thinking about things. So those conversations really need to be honest, they need to be direct, they need to be age appropriate, and they need to be accurate. And so kids will benefit from getting really accurate, upfront information about what's happening. I think one of the things that we worry about with parents answering questions sometimes is they want to add too much detail.
Dr.
Right.
Lassen, we're not always prepared for the questions.
Right.
They come out of the blue.
So a good rule of thumb is just to answer the question that the child asked and no more. Okay, so to be very succinct and not use that as a platform for a parent to discuss their own anxieties and their own thoughts and opinions about what's happening.
That's a really good point. Just answer the question that was asked.
Answer the question. If kids want more information, then they will ask another question. So there's information sharing that's really important, but the other thing that kids are wanting when they're asking parents questions is comfort and reassurance. And so we need to really model a calm, peaceful response. And so parents need to monitor this. If they're themselves feeling very anxious, then that will transfer to children. So we need to make sure that kids know that we're going to do our best to keep them safe. We can't guarantee anything, we can't promise anything, but we can let them know that we will be protecting them as best we can, and that there are a lot of adults working on the resolution.
Well, and it's tough, Dr. Lassen, when you're looking at images in Ukraine, on the other side of the world, it feels so far away. Then we bring in topics like school shootings. How do you have those conversations? And how do I send my kid off saying, I can't promise anything? That's really tough to do.
And the exposure in many of these situations is the same. The exposure to events halfway across the world is no different than exposure to the one down the street. You know, you think about social media and other media types where kids get their information from. And so it is very important that we're making sure that we're accurately portraying what's going on. We've had kids, think that the Ukraine conflict is happening right next door. And so they don't understand always, depending on their age and maturity, the differences between those variables. So we have to make sure that we're providing accurate information, but also the level of exposure is important. So we know that the more intensely we're exposed to an event, the more likely or the more at risk we are for developing a problematic response. So if things are happening personally and very close in a child's life, then we need to pay more attention to those because they will likely be much more impactful.
What about prompting conversations? So my child maybe caught a glimpse of something on the news, and is it okay to ask them, do you have any questions about that? Or what did you think about that? Or do you let it lie?
No, it's a great question. Yeah, we have to start by understanding what kids know and what they've been exposed to and what they've heard and seen. And so it's a great way to start the conversation instead of assuming that we know what their questions are or what they've heard and seen. And then that can start a really great conversation, and we can clarify anything that needs to be clarified. We can add information to what they've already received. And so starting in that way is really helpful. I think we also want to make sure we're not promoting hatred and we're not promoting labeling and things like that we're promoting compassion and action. Kids are going to tend to, respond better to those kinds of conversations.
I love all this good advice. I'm taking mental notes in my head. I have a 5 and an 8-year-old, and I want to ask both of you because I think you have teenagers and up, correct? And you have younger children.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Correct.
So I want to ask each of you, and Dr. Nawalanic, I'll let you, how do you talk to your kids about things?
Well, so around this specific thing, we have not, because our kids are 6 and 8, and we don't let them in the room when we're watching the news, because there's so much risk that they're going to walk in on something that's going to prompt one of those conversations, probably prematurely. And so this is a very different situation than the pandemic, which completely impacted their day-to-day existence in their life. And so this is something that I think we've kind of taken the measure of how directly does this have to impact them? Or is this something they're going to actually have to think about and interact with? So we're expecting that if they talk about it at school, they come home, they have questions, we'll certainly address it. Probably in terms of Star Wars, something they can relate to. But the idea here that we're going to actually say, hey, sit down. We'd like to talk to you about Ukraine, Russia. It's just not.
But if they were to see an explosion go off and go, what is that? You know, it's not easy to try to put it into terms that they can understand. Then you have older children where you can walk them through how we got to this place and what it all really means, right?
Right. For older children, we can have more adult-like conversations. Again, parents know their children best, and you really have to make sure that you're making those judgments as you're having these conversations, because some kids who are older aren't ready for more information. Some kids who are younger are, based on what they've experienced, their maturity level, and so forth. Yeah. But generally, kids, as they get older, they are able to manage more information. They're able to have more of a back and forth conversation about the details of what's happening. And with all of these things, we need to really point kids towards solutions, towards what's happening to further a solution, and really help them stay engaged in productive and meaningful actions, and helping keep them engaged in their regular routines. Routines for kids convey comfort and reassurance. Okay, these things might be happening in Ukraine, but I'm still going to school. I still have my morning routine. Mom and dad are still there, etc. So we need to really try to focus on that stability in kids' lives and making sure that that's in place as much as possible.
All right, let's talk about adults. How are they doing? Just with everything. We come out of, we've seen the worst of the pandemic. We hope the worst is behind us. We don't know what lies ahead there, but now we're dealing with other financial impacts. What are you hearing, and what do we do?
Well, I think what I'm hearing right now is, or what I'm seeing actually, is a lot of people trying to kind of dogpile the Russia-Ukraine situation on top of the pandemic. And I think that anytime that we're looking at compounding unrelated events, then there's a potential for increased anxiety. And so what I encourage people to do is look at, right now, I mean, what I saw yesterday, all my patients that I saw in my clinic were upset that they had to be talking to me instead of outside enjoying the weather. And so the thing that I want to encourage everybody is to look that right now, I mean, the weather is gorgeous. Let's get outside. Let's take advantage of the peace and calm that we have right now, and the bit of a lull in the COVID world, and maybe even seeing us progressing towards the end of it. And I think that the more that we can emphasize the more immediate rewards in terms of what we're doing to improve our immediate situation, the better it's going to be. I don't know anybody that in my sphere has any specific influence over the events that we're seeing unfold in Ukraine and Russia. And so I think that we just have to think of how is this immediately impacting us. It's good to be aware, but when we're spending too much time watching 24-hour news cycle, getting news from unvetted outlets, TikTok, Instagram, I mean, there's a lot of potential for heightening the response. And I think that the best advice I can give is to keep in mind the purpose behind the information. And if you feel that it's really sensational information and you feel a real pull to continue clicking or tuning in or staying on top of it, that's probably not the best information that you need at this point.
So over the last few years, you two have both been part of a group of folks who are helping other people get through all of these rough times, but you are not shielded from that either. My question to both of you, whoever wants to go first, is how do you keep your stress levels down? How do you release in a healthy way? I know you ride your bike and all that good stuff sometimes.
Sure.
But
all the time.
But we want to know, what do the professionals do? What is your go-to, Dr. Lassen?
Well, it's a great question. I'm not sure I've ever been asked that before.
All right.
But I think in a word, for me, it's really about balance. And so trying to balance life and stay engaged in healthy, meaningful, productive activities for me is really important. But also balance in how I view world events and my own day-to-day life. And so I think there's a danger in becoming unbalanced in life in many ways, and these things can tend to overtake our thoughts and our actions, as Dr. Nawalanic has indicated. And so for me, it's an issue of staying balanced, of staying connected with people that I love and who support me, getting good sleep and good nutrition, staying physically active, and really taking a balanced worldview of all of this, meaning that seeing things as temporary. You know, we know from a lot of research on those people who are resilient in the face of these kinds of things that they're optimistic. They don't see things as permanent. They see things as temporary, and they see their own reactions and feelings as temporary. And so for me, that helps. That helps day to day to try to achieve that balance.
Yeah, keep your balance in check and always be evaluating, am I tipping to one side when it comes to social media, or, just my activities or drinking or whatever it is that you have, vices to. What about you?
A lot of the same things, except that the big thing that I try to do is check in with myself on a regular basis and see how I'm doing and kind of have this meta awareness of how I'm thinking about things and how I'm behaving. And if I notice that I'm being a little snippy at times, that's kind of an indication that
Snippy?
I know, right? I never come in hot. I'm usually very measured. I'm not sure how you could tell the difference between Dr. Lassen and myself. It's just so measured and calm.
Right.
No, I think honestly, sometimes that kind of heat that I bring is my way of kind of discharging a lot of the tension. I'm not keeping the lid on super tightly. And so I use humor an awful lot to deal with things. I mean, go figure, right? And that is something that I notice when I stop doing that, or any variance from my baseline, is when I kind of take a step back. And to be fair, one of the things that I do is when I notice that I'm really kind of under a lot, I cut alcohol out completely,
You shared that. You did that during COVID.
During COVID, and I've done it again because a couple of things. One, it was purely vain because my waist, I was starting to fight with my pants again,
Your buttons were screaming.
Yeah, thanks. So that's not great, not the best. And then besides that is that, there is no comfort in alcohol. I mean, it's not, I don't need a social lubricant. I'm plenty social. I think my wife wishes I were far less social. And I was actually thinking when talking about how to talk to kids, like keep it narrow. I don't know that I've ever had a narrow conversation and pointed in my life. It's like tangent ball. Like, let's go over here, now over there. So good feedback. But, I just, the alcohol is not a helpful situation.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think when we look at our two psychologists, you guys, like you said, everything's always in check. Everything's always in balance. But you're human, you're people, you have those outlets, and you have to kind of evaluate where you are in your life and make changes. And I think it's nice, and we appreciate you sharing that with us, first of all.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, having kids, they're a great thing. They're like a nice litmus test to tell how you're doing, like your level of patience. And I notice that when I'm impatient, that is an indication I need to do some breathing, chill out, and then actually remember what an amazing gift they are, and then spend some time. Like yesterday, after 7 patients in a row in clinic, I get home and the kids are outside, and my older had a little bit of a temper thing with our younger, and I kind of reacted, and I was like, okay, hang on. I was like, go get the football, let's throw a football, and spend some mindful time connecting, as opposed to stewing in stuff that's already done.
And it doesn't always come naturally. I mean, sometimes you have to specifically go, wait a minute, what's happening? And take a moment, grab the football. It's not just instant, it's not just innate all the time, right?
No, and for me, it's a daily battle, right? Wake up every day trying to achieve that balance that I hope to achieve, and it doesn't ever happen perfectly. But every new day is a new day to try to balance that. And I find that really invigorating and exciting, that each day we have to to try to make it better than yesterday was.
The big reset. Okay, so we've been talking about the unrest and the war in Ukraine, and I think a big thing is people feel helpless and they want to help out. There's really nothing they can do. So I want to bring in our next guest. She's joining us now she's joined us virtually this morning. We appreciate that. They want to help. People want to help out. At Heart to Heart International, Dr. Agustina Behringer, you all have been helping Ukraine for decades. And I want to talk to you first a little bit because we want to show some photos of when you all did your first airlift in Ukraine back in 1994. You've been there dozens and dozens of times over the past few decades. How have things changed?
Well, thank you, first of all. Good morning. You are correct. So our ties to Ukraine in the humanitarian aspect go back decades. We started very shortly after our organization was funded. And since then, we've shipped over 60 different shipments of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. At this moment, we are preparing an advanced assessment team to go not directly into Ukraine, but to the bordering countries to assess the holes and the gaps in needs. Absorbing refugees is always a big lift for other countries, and we want to see exactly how we can help. Right now, we are prepared to continue shipping hygiene kits and medications and medical supplies to support those who are currently escaping Ukraine, but also those who are in Ukraine and have not been able to get out yet.
Yeah, we have a QR code on the screen right there. That will. We're going to talk more about how people can help. But this, if you have your phone, you can hover over that, and it will show you how you can donate money, which is actually probably the best way people can help. Heart to Heart International will make sure that those funds are out properly and getting to the right people in the right places. How has COVID impacted the help that you offer? And now that travel restrictions are lifting, is that helping you get to the places where you're needed most?
Yes, absolutely. There's always, the little extra step of trying to figure out the timing when you're traveling halfway across the world and you have to have a result from a COVID test within 24 hours of arrival. You're like, where am I going to get this test? When it takes, however many hours to even get there. But that is a small obstacle compared to how it was a couple of years ago. The opportunity that COVID brought to Heart International is that we were more focused on disaster response and helping domestically and globally. But when we were not able to travel at the beginning of the pandemic, we found lots of opportunities to help in our local area. And with that, we ended up creating a dedicated Kansas City programs department. And they have taken off running, and it's amazing all the things they're doing. They were very focused on testing initially in the pandemic. Then they switched to vaccinations. Actually, the team is on their way to the Boot Heel of Missouri to do rural community vaccinations as we speak. They'll be there in association with the YMCA doing vaccines tomorrow and Saturday. And as the vaccines needs start to wind down, we are exploring other opportunities to work with our local partners to expand access to healthcare in our metro area, as well as domestically and across the globe.
Doctor, how can people help the folks in Ukraine?
So as you mentioned, there are a few ways in which you can help right now. We are focusing on our hygiene kits capabilities right now because those are a sort of fast way that we can get support directly to those who need it the most and who have lost everything or left everything behind. A great way, for example, for organizations and companies to get involved at the entire organization level is for them to fund or sponsor hygiene kit builds. Then individuals on a limited opportunity basis can also just sign up to volunteer at our headquarters to do those builds. The link for that opportunity will be up next week on our website, so keep an eye out for that. And then lastly, as you mentioned, Jess, donating is always appreciated. We cannot do the work we do without funds. It's the reality of the world. So the QR code will take you to to a page where you can make a monetary donation. Big or small, there's no amount too small. It all adds up and it all goes to the right places.
All right, thank you for that. We'll get back with you here in just a moment. Dr. Lassen, how beneficial is it for kids to be involved in helping? I think their empathy shows through. They don't know where to channel it when they see that someone's hurting. We're using the topic of Ukraine right now, but it's all sorts of things. I know when my kids see somebody homeless on the side of the street, they want to go and get them. They want them to come and stay at our house. They want to help. And I think it's really important for parents to help find that outlet for them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kids especially are at a little bit of a disadvantage in society because they aren't allowed to maybe do all of the things that are available to us as adults. But you're right that they want to help. There's that desire to do something and to contribute. And what we know about doing those kinds of things, productive service opportunities and things like that, is it does tend to reduce anxiety. And it channels that anxiety and all of the stress into something very productive and meaningful. And so there are a lot of different ways that children can contribute, and it doesn't have to be to the particular event that you're even discussing with them. But the more we can get them out and to take action, to do something for someone, is an incredibly healing process for each of us, especially children.
That raises good adults. Good, loving adults. I'm going to weave in some community questions because we're getting a few, and then we'll keep going with some questions I have. But Joellen has a question. Dr. Nawalanic, what about the elderly who live alone, aren't able to get out much, and they're watching national and local news on a loop all day long? Just advice maybe for caretakers for those folks?
Well, I think first of all, great question, but I think that during the winter it was a lot harder to get them outside. You're not going to just be like, let's bundle you up and wheel you outside. The idea is that there are other things to watch. We have unprecedented levels of entertainment that's readily accessible through any number of streaming outlets and whatever else that you want to use. And in fact, a lot of older programs are available, so they might be able to kind of go back, turn back the clock, watch stuff that they remember when they were younger, and that can kind of trigger some warm memories from their past. So that's something they can do. The idea of just sitting and watching news on loop over and over, it's misery creating. And the reality here is that what I encourage everybody to do is kind of a self check-in. How is what you're watching making you feel? And if it's making you feel really frustrated, if it's making you feel very angry, if it's making you feel very afraid, there's a button. It's usually the red one up at the top corner of the remote that you can push and you can turn it off. And just getting away from the screen, even if it's to go sit and look out a window, or if there's a caretaker, take them outside for a short walk, sit outside, just sit in a chair. My wife and I think people think we're part parakeet for the way that we will sit in the front and in a couple chairs we have and just drink our coffee and just kind of watch the world happen. We're ready to be 70. But the reality is that the more time that we can spend outside, getting fresh air, getting some sun, vitamin D, obviously don't get burnt, but these are all things that we can do. And if you look at the benefit of that is A, getting outside, B, you're getting a little exercise if you're able to walk. And these are things that will immediately improve your mood and help you to feel better. And at the end of the day, feel like you did something more than just sitting in front of the old boob tube.
All right. What about adults who are stressed out about all these other things? I don't think it's anything new. I think finances and 401ks and gas prices and grocery prices, it seems to be very, magnified right now, and no thanks to social media and people getting everybody all riled up about things. And of course it takes a political stance and all that junk. But how do we kind of, again, find the balance of adult problems and put them in the box where they belong and move on?
I think that if nothing else, seeing these images, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, the socioeconomic spectrum, these are people whose lives are being completely upended in a very real and meaningful way. I think that rather than focus on the stress of increasing prices of things or decreasing stock values, understand that when we look at financial systems around the world, they're cyclical. They have ups, they have downs. So I don't think any, I just maybe should have a financial expert on here, but anyone that I've ever spoken to always says, don't have a panic, don't knee-jerk react, wait. There's nothing that says that you need to pull your money out now because it's going to go down worse. But obviously speak to an expert. But the idea is that we would do well to take the comparative strategy and look and say, how are we really doing? How impacted are we actually? And look at what we have. Turn to the positive. Don't dwell on the negative.
And remember that these are not the only things happening in the world.
Right.
There are many other things going on that are very wonderful and meaningful that deserve our attention as well.
Yep, good point. Just want to remind everyone about the QR code to help donate to Heart International. You can go on there and it'll take you right to their Ukraine page if you're looking for a way to help. And while not everyone is able to donate their time or money, plenty of people from all over the metro are doing their part to send their support to those over in Ukraine. Photographer and loyal viewer Rusty Leffel, he sent us these photos of people protesting the invasion. It's kind of what they could do to maybe feel better, get outside, get some sunshine, and do something good. These were taken down on the Country Club Plaza this past weekend. This is one of thousands of rallies that are being held around the world, all in an effort to honor and support the brave folks who are over in Ukraine. So thanks, Rusty, for sending those in. We appreciate it. And we're going to continue with a few more questions that some of our viewers have. And this next one, Dr. Lassen, you touched on it a bit. It was about when it's okay to talk to your kids. And this woman says that they don't normally watch TV, but they have an 8 and a 2-year-old. 2-year-old's pretty young, but curious, when is it good to bring up a topic, where they could reasonably just be kept in the dark, kind of like Nawalanic, what you just said, what they don't know can't hurt them. But I come from, like, my kids will go over to my mother's house and she watches the news cycle, and she's like, well, the kids need to know about this stuff. And I was like, right, but then you have to take it one step further and continue to explain it. I go, are you also taking the time to sit down and explain what they're seeing and what they're hearing? So is 8 and 2, where do those kiddos fall into the appropriate
Well,
line?
it's difficult to list out ages, but what I will say is that the world is rapidly shrinking, meaning that especially kids are exposed to vast amounts of information immediately through different media resources. And so generally we're seeing kids exposed to these things at younger and younger ages, and the need to respond to that is increasing for parents and other family members. So 8 years of age is not necessarily too young, certainly, to be addressing this. Schools are talking about it. Kids are hearing about it on the playground, and for those with social media, they're certainly seeing it there. And so a great way to start is just to ask, what have you heard about this?
Yeah.
What have you seen? Some kids are not.
Because then you'll know the level of what information they need.
Right, then you'll know where to start, right, what they've heard and seen. Some kids are not going to be interested in it. They may have heard about it, but they may not be interested in it, which is going to set you down a different path than if you have a child who's really asking questions, who's bothered by it, who's having, some deeper thoughts about it. So we have to start where the child is, and in order to do that, we just have to ask those simple questions. What do you know and what have you heard? What questions do you have?
Well, and this goes with, like you said, we've talked about all the other issues. Ukraine is the topic today because it's happening in the news, but next week it's going to be something else, whether it's a school shooting, suicide, conversations about sex. I mean, these are all, is it the same process with these big topics that maybe parents are not ready to? There is no way I'm ready to talk about any of that, but it's a fact, reality, right?
Yeah. It is basically the same
So
process.
can we go back to the wonderful things that are happening in the world?
Right.
You just gave like a list, like bam, 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 bam.
Boom,
like,
boom, boom.
Yeah. Like,
Hey, but those topics are coming, Lassen, and you know they are, and I'm going to be totally caught off guard. I'm going to be having my coffee and spit it out across the table because one of my kids asked me about some big topic that I'm just not prepared for.
Right. So the fact of the matter is we're never fully prepared as parents for what kids are going to ask. Another way to see this, though, is to really make sure that we're creating an environment with our children, an environment of connection, an environment of communication and comfort and support, and an environment where it's normal to talk about things. It's normal to share feelings and reactions to what's happening in our lives. And I think if we can accomplish that, then when those big topics come, we'll be in such a better place to address the flavor of the day, whatever that might be. And so instead of thinking really reactively about how to address A, B, or C, think more broadly about how can I cultivate this environment of communication and reassurance and honesty. And I think we'll be in a good place to address those things. But these things are important to address. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we get the questions from parents, should I even talk with my kids about these things? They've been through hard things before. Is it going to upset them? Mm-hmm. And really the short answer is that it's very important for us to talk about hard things with kids. Hard things happen. It's part of life. And to avoid those things, I think, sends the wrong message. When we avoid, we send the message that we can't talk about it, it's off limits, it's too hard, we can't deal with it.
You touched on it. So if a child has gone through a previous trauma, this goes to just knowing your child, but if they've gone through a previous trauma, we don't want to completely steer away from things, but you have to maybe enter those conversations maybe with a different approach or a different timeline.
Sure, and parents as the best experts on their children will have to make some of those decisions. But if you have a child who's experienced a number of other traumatic or really stressful events, you might approach that differently in the context of those other events, in the context of what you know about how your child responds and what has worked for them. But we certainly don't want to avoid. And in fact, one of the foundations of treating individuals who have experienced traumatic things is that we don't avoid. Mm-hmm. That we really approach those situations and we learn how to manage the feelings that come up as we approach difficult and triggering events. So we certainly want to be modeling this really healthy approach of we can do hard things, we can talk about hard things, we can get through this together.
It's so much easier said than done. This is why if anything was going on with my kids, this is the guy I'm sending my kids to, because you've got the magic touch. Hey, I want to remind people who are listening to us on our podcast, we've been talking about our QR code that we've been putting up to help out Heart to Heart International. If you want to donate to help the efforts in Ukraine, go to hearttoheart.org. Since you can't see that QR code. So hearttoheart.org, and it'll take you straight to that page where you can do that donating. A couple of quick COVID questions or vaccine questions, Dr. Hawkinson. It wouldn't be a show without those. So Debbie wants to know, how do we know yet if Paxlovid will be given to both vaccinated and unvaccinated?
I think eventually it will. Obviously, the highest risk of people going to the hospital, going to the ICU, that continues to remain in that unvaccinated population. But the other thing you have to remember is that moving through all this, we will see people have been infected 2 or 3 times more than likely as we go through this. In addition, vaccination as well as infection. I think eventually it still will be okay to give those to the vaccinated people as well. But again, right now it's still early. We know that overall the supplies of Paxlovid are still low. I do anticipate those supplies will start to build up just as the supplies for vaccines did. So I anticipate that. And again, I think as we continue to move through this with vaccination and infection or recurrent infection, overall, I think individually and as a population, we will gain more immunity. Hopefully, that will then continue to lead us to further decrease more and more the amount of people that do come to the hospital and need to come to the hospital for COVID-19.
All right, last 2 quick questions, kind of a combo. Lindsay and Michael, curious, any news on boosters for those 5 to 11, and what's the news on a 4th shot for everyone else?
Yeah, so for the boosters, we touched on this a little bit in with Dr. Stites last week. Yesterday, there was that publication that came out of the CDC that made the news because it showed that there wasn't a lot of protection in those kids, those young kids 5 and above. But again, the main point to that, which I think was not really expressed in those outlets, was that that age group did not get the booster. So I hope and believe that that is further evidence that even those younger ages do need that booster dose, that third dose after the first two. Hopefully that will come soon. I'm not exactly sure when. And then the fourth dose, again, right now we have very little information. I think we're all looking to Israel because they have been one of the countries that have been first to publish early data. We know that they have been given fourth doses for a while, so we will see what the clinical efficacy of that. And it may not be needed for everybody. It may be important for certain populations, such as older populations, 60 and above, 70 above, but we're going to wait for that clinical information. We do know from basic science research, really, that it seems to be those three exposures to spike protein, whether through the vaccination and or vaccination plus infection, really offer great protection. And again, when we're talking about protection here, we're talking about protection against hospitalization, severe disease, and death. So we really are still waiting for a lot of that information to come out, and when we do, we'll keep you up to date.
All right, let's get to some final thoughts today. Dr. Lassen, I'll let you get us started.
Well, I just want to encourage parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, all of you who care for children to really spend time with them and to help them achieve that balance in their lives. Enjoy spending time with them, enjoy connecting with them, and really be on the lookout for any major changes that you see in children's behavior, their mood, and make sure that you're talking with somebody if you have any concerns or questions about that. Children are incredibly resilient, and so the vast majority are doing very well, and we need to make sure that we're staying connected with them and spending time with them.
Great advice. Dr. Nawalanic.
Yeah, so the thought that I keep having around this is that whenever something really horrible happens in the world, there's a tendency and a temptation to try to hyper-focus on the darkness. And what I really want to challenge everybody to do is to look to organizations like Heart to Heart, to look at Chef Andres, who's an amazing man with Central World Kitchen, and realize that humanity is still what we have to put our faith in. We have to trust in one another. We have to believe in the positivity and the ability of the human spirit. And that, the Beatles said it best, all you need is love. And the more that you can turn to, look to, find the love that's in the response to this, where we see the people coming and doing the hard things, and look around in your actual immediate life, find that love, find that light, let that be your focus. You're going to make it through this and everything will be all right.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. Dr. Hawkinson, final thoughts today.
Yeah, I think it's good that we are talking about other topics. We are moving away. I think everybody, and we know that everybody is mentally and physically and spiritually exhausted from COVID-19, so it's good we're moving on onto different topics that affect us in our daily lives. It's important to remember, though, we know mask mandates are really have gone away. If you do feel unsafe, and be thoughtful about those situations that you're in, you are always welcome to wear a mask. We know they do help protect you. Continue to do those preventive measures as well, such as vaccination and being up to date with your booster. Because the virus is still out there, but we are starting to move forward as a society, and that's a good thing. But always remember to keep yourself and your bubble or your family safe, and doing those public health guidance and those medical guidance to help do those preventive measures.
Dr. Behringer, thank you so much for being with us and all that you do here locally and around the globe. Just your final thoughts today, and just remind us once again how we can help best.
Sure. I love the idea of involving children in helping. My kids are in their 20s now, but they were young during, 9/11 and Afghanistan and all of that, and we had a lot of hard conversations. We do love having children help with those hygiene kit builds. 10 end up with an adult, and so look for those sign-up opportunities on our website starting next week. And I'll say that I love Ben Franklin's quote, "There never was a good war or a bad peace."
We love that. We will end with that on those final thoughts. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, appreciate our guests today. We have some fun news, though. Do we have Baby Barr? Is Baby Barr? We don't have him? Okay. Well, we just want to congratulate Dr. Nathan Barr. He was on yesterday, and he had his baby, finally. We were waiting, and we were supposed to have a picture of him. So, Alexis, I was going to make you follow a really cute baby today. Sorry.
Thanks for not making me do that. Babies win.
So we're going to look at your cute, darling face instead, apparently. Alexis Delson is joining us in Studio B with a preview of today's episode of All Things Heart, which will be coming up at 10 o'clock this morning. So set your alarms for that. Good morning to you. Before we get to that, tell us about this exceptional piece of art that we're going to be able to see in the Parade of Hearts.
Okay, so this is all part of an elite group because there are only 154 winning designs out of 700 submissions. 4 of those winning hearts were designed by our teammates here at the health system. So we want to give you a peek at the winning heart that art therapist Amy Eli Huxtable is designing.
Amy Eli Huxtable has lost track of how many Sharpies they've gone through while decorating their Parade of Hearts winning heart.
You know, I wish I had started counting.
It's a painstaking process that the art therapist at the Marillac campus says is also a labor of love. Their winning Parade of Hearts design is titled Pride of the City. It's a tribute to the LGBTQ+ community and all the young people they've helped through their art therapy.
It's going to be the Kansas City skyline with kind of a rainbow spectrum of dots, kind of just to represent the LGBTQIA community in Kansas City.
The pointillism style representing individuals coming together.
I just want them to know that they're accepted and can be represented and that their voices can be heard.
We'll see you tomorrow at 8. Have a great, fantastic Thursday.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stein's podcast. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning for this Best of Morning Medical Update. You can catch our live broadcasts every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And don't forget, you can always email us at medicalnewsnetwork@kumc.edu or reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We will be back to our live shows 5 days a week starting September 6th. So please go out, make it a great day.